Gentlemen, on this 5th day of July, in the year 2050, I, Lady Gillespie, am proud to present to you Toothless Hawkins and his Robot Jazz Band. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Check 1 2 1 2. Think we're all good. Get this cam going. There we go. Hello everyone. Hello students. Hello anyone else who might be tuning in. First things first, please let me know how the music is, if it's too loud, too quiet, etc. I'm bumping it down a little bit in my own headphones. Second, shout out who all is in chat. Unfortunately, the list that I am provided is not necessarily accurate. I see we have a few people. Before we really get started, good, we got a sounds good. Before we really get started, I'm just going to buy us a bit more time for anyone who's taking a bit of time to tune in. How's everyone doing? I haven't spoken to most of you in, well, practically a month. So, how's it going? How have you been dealing with the, don't want to say quarantine, but the shelter in place, staying at home? Who all still has to go out? I know a few people in my other class have work, and that means they have to go out on a regular basis. How's everyone doing? Yeah, my audio is good. I'll speak for myself. I've been, well, I'm one of the lucky ones. I get to work, which in any other scenario would not necessarily be a good thing, but it means I have something to do aside from playing Animal Crossing and doing puzzles. Outside of that, I've been going for little walks around my neighborhood. I live right on some walking trails, so I have that little luxury as well. But it's not easy, at least from my perspective. Cabin fever can definitely be a bit of an issue. Let's see, we got Kenna saying she's ready to get back to school, and I agree. Well, for myself, I miss the college, but I definitely have had a few students that are anxious to get started again. But the good news is that things are slowly getting better. The bad news is that, well, very recently, Doug Ford announced that schools are not reopening next month. Or they're not reopening on May 4th, which I think was the original hope. Which kind of sucks, but we have alternative teaching methods like this. Hopefully this works out for most of you guys. I'm hoping that the rest of your teachers have come up with equally innovative methods. I hate to think that you all just have online learning PowerPoints and that's about it. Which is why I do stuff like this. You get to see me, we get to talk. Speaking of talk, feel free to keep chatting in the chat. It doesn't really distract me from my job all that much. If you do need my attention, if you have a specific question, if you want to interrupt me to ask a question, just at me. In chat, just type at Chris Arndt instructor, and it'll show up as a big highlight in my chat so I can see that you have a question. Otherwise, feel free to chat amongst each other. Oh. Can't hear me. Is anyone else having issues hearing me? Let's see, I need to wait for chat to catch back up, but yeah, anyone else shout out if you can't hear me. Beauty. I can empathize, Samio, with the audio interface issue. I'm currently wearing 2 sets of headphones because my audio interface doesn't play well with my streaming interface. And I like to have music while I stream. So I am glad, who was it? Kiara, I'm glad you like this setup. It's unfortunate that it's better than a lot of other teachers. I would hope that most of them try to do something creative, but I'm lucky enough that I know how to do this. If I'm being honest, this was kind of already part of my plan for my teaching just a couple months down the road. Things got pushed up because of COVID, which has happened with a lot of things. So we have a good group in chat at this point. I'm seeing about 10 people. What's new in the news? I have a couple articles that I gave you guys on Canvas to check out. But what about for yourselves? It's been a while since I've asked this question, so there must have been something going on. And COVID is not a good enough answer. I'm going to switch over. Well, actually, while I wait for that to kick in, while I wait for stuff to roll in, I want to go over the class rules real quick. Super simple, right on the bottom of the screen. Don't be a jerk. Don't spam the chat. Keep your questions relevant, at least if you're adding me. And I reserve the right to add any rules as they become pertinent. Basically, don't be a jerk is the biggest one. The nice part about this is that I offer a recorded version of the video after everything's said and done, and I offer copies of my PowerPoint, so if you're being a jerk in chat, I'm able to kick you out of my digital classroom because you can still access the material later. That said, I don't want to kick anyone out. I'm hoping we all can be kind of copacetic. We can all get along. So, back to the question at hand. What's new in the news? No comments as of yet, which admittedly is not a new phenomenon for us at times. I'll get started. Throw it over to my display. There we go. Here's a big one. So yesterday, I believe it was, President Donald Trump cut funding to the WHO, the World Health Organization. For anyone who's not familiar with the World Health Organization at this point, please look into it. It's an important thing. Basically, he's saying that they sided with China, that they haven't done a good enough job with all this COVID stuff, And so why should the US be helping to fund it? Because all different countries feed into it, similar to NATO or the UN. All these countries feed into it. The US feeds a lot of money into it, and Trump feels like that is a waste of money. Here we go. We got a little chart up here demonstrating who pays how much. The US pays $57.9 million. That looks like over this year so far. Below that, we got China, Japan, Germany. We're down near the bottom of the top 10 list at $6.5 million. Either way, everyone pays in their due. And Trump doesn't think that's fair, I guess. It's big news. It's big news, and a lot of other countries, a lot of other world leaders are kind of flipping out at Trump in the US right now over it, because at the end of the day, everyone needs this organization, at least right now while we're in the middle of a pandemic. So, to suddenly cut $57.9 million of funding to one of these programs that helps everyone not only hurts the program, but more often than not hurts the people who need it most. The countries that can't throw all this money into it, the people who don't necessarily have their own health insurance, health benefits, their own doctor. And so this is big. I'm going to move on a little bit into some new news. Getting back to Hamilton. A Hamilton couple, as of today, faces almost 300 fraud-related charges. The nice thing about the pandemic is that crime reporting will never cease, regardless of a pandemic. So I thought I'd grab one of those for us. There's this couple, 34-year-old Hamilton woman and a 31-year-old Hamilton man with no fixed address, facing 292 fraud-related charges, including 152 counts of identity theft, 78 counts of identity fraud, 23 counts of fraud under $5,000, unauthorized possession of a credit card, mischief to property over $5,000, possession of counterfeit mark. That means that to be in possession of counterfeiting tools. Think of it like to have a stamp with someone's signature on it. The man in this couple also faces extra counts of fraud, identity theft, and identity fraud. Yes, Kiara, that is definitely a thing Hamilton police have been talking about. And, well, from my perspective, living where I do, there's a lot of big empty roads, and you can definitely hear them racing. Not every night, but enough that you know what's going on. But yes, there's definitely a lot of policing articles going on right now. Some are fair, some are not. At the end of the day, this is a very difficult time to cover things like crime, because we can't just, as a journalist, you can't go out and just pound the pavement and ask people directly. You can't just wander down to the police station. We have the luxury of being able to call, being able to talk to people, but it's definitely more work. Everything's a bit more work right now when you can't leave your house. Some of the big stories going on are people who are being fined for breaking social isolation, social distancing. There was I think it was a Oakville family fined $800 for all going walking together, despite living in the same house. Allegedly, I don't have any evidence to back that up, but I hear rumors of it. I actually have an article that kind of relates to this, and this is an area of contention for me, is the idea of enforcing social distancing and how how severe we should quote unquote police that. So at the end of the day, most people are chilling in their own places. Most people are going for little walks in their neighborhood. Some are not. Some are walking up the Wentworth Stairs. Some are going to waterfalls. Some are grouping together. There's a housing complex near my place that a whole bunch of kids all play basketball together every day. And it's a difficult thing to kind of figure out where you fall, because it sucks to be the person who has to yell at the group of kids to stop playing. It makes me feel honestly quite old, and I feel like a jerk. They want to get outside. Everyone wants to get outside right now, but at the same time, there's the health and safety of it all. Clearly, the 20 kids playing basketball don't all live in the same house, right? A stupid friend of mine got $750 for being at Beasley. Yeah, I believe it was the fines start at $750. Apologies. In Hamilton, the initial fine for individuals in violation of the bylaw, this being social distancing bylaws, is $500. That fine goes up for more serious offenses to $10,000, and repeat offenses can cost as much as $25,000. Corporations and larger entities are fined even more. Residents organizing or attending gatherings of more than 5 people may be charged under the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, which carries a fine starting at $750. Whether it's a matter of, social distance. Don't go out unless you need to. If you are going out for exercise, make it short, make it in your area. Don't go all the way to some conservation area in the car. Just take a walk. That said, there are times where, how do I put it? Bylaw officers get it wrong. Who'd have thought? And those are times where we rely on things like, in the Hammer or local reporters. If things are wrong, we have the opportunity to face it in court, whatever. We can also bring it to the public, bring it to reporters. That's what part of what our job is to make people aware of what's going on, both good and bad. Geez, I can't imagine having to spend a year in prison around all those people because you wanted to spend time around people. So finally, I have a nice little article here about how Justin Trudeau is now delivering his daily address in ASMR. I'll definitely weigh in on the fines and all that in a moment. First, we should talk about. I'm curious who all's been watching the Prime Minister address every day. Maybe not every day, but who's seen it. Obviously, for anyone who's not familiar, the Beaverton is a satire website, but there was actually a big kind of flip out over Justin Trudeau using the phrase, I hesitate to even say it, using the phrase speaking moistly. It started trending on Twitter. It was a whole thing. And so all these sort of parody articles have started popping up. Never mind the classic, like, Justin Trudeau's a hottie and, like, all those other themes always rear their head every once in a while. So I have been scouring for the last few days for fake news that's coming out right now about coronavirus. And we're going to be talking about that today in class. Real quick, does anyone else have any news they wish to share? While we're waiting on that, I will give my opinions on the social distancing fines. In a nutshell, and this is me speaking as a private citizen, in a nutshell, I believe social distancing is super important. When I go for my walks, I go out with, I might go out with my sister and her boyfriend who also live in the same house as me. But we distance ourselves from others who are walking. You kind of do that, both of you walk on the opposite side of the sidewalk kind of thing, and you like, there's that weird like tension as you're passing by each other, like you have to hold your breath. I am all for social distancing, and I am to a degree for policing it. What I don't like the idea of is bylaw officers kind of just waiting to catch people, similar to a police trap on the side of the road, waiting to catch people who are speeding. I think that there are better opportunities to enforce social distancing. I'd much rather not worry about the family of four going for a walk and worry about gatherings over Easter, for example. Not that I have no comment on like commentary on religion itself, but there have been gatherings over Easter. People get together for it, and that is an issue. Justin Trudeau is gross. I want to shave his face. I'm not in love with the beard, but I don't mind him too much. So, I'm not seeing any new news pop up. So I'm going to get to work on our class. Let's minimize that. So, again, today we're talking about misinformation, which is something I've already tackled in class before. What I want to go over today is misinformation's kind of even more bold and even more prevalent with COVID-19 going on, because everyone has a take on their circumstance, on what's going on. Beyond that, I'm also talking about journalism ethics, which will lead into our code of ethics assignment, which is due in a couple of weeks. Don't worry, it's nothing major or nothing huge. So, to preface everything, well, what misinformation have you come across during the pandemic? And I ask you this because I asked on Facebook among all my Facebook friends what misinformation they came across. Let me get my head. Oh. There, I'm going to throw myself in the top corner. So I asked people on Facebook what misinformation they came across or have come across, and that's very much what fed into the stuff I'm going to show you today. Some people commented with, there was this one thing that is definitively fake. We're going to be talking about 5G a little bit later, and that's a very good example of that. Other people started talking about how, for example, people are spreading the fake news about how they're releasing prisoners because of COVID-19. Unfortunately, that's not fake news. They have in fact released some prisoners. They have in fact released some people who were undergoing trial, in various stages of trial, because at the end of the day, the risk wasn't worth the incarceration, I guess. I don't understand necessarily the logic behind it, but it is true. Yes, for the record, this is not a major thing. They haven't released 10,000 prisoners back into the country. It was like 30 prisoners here who have done all sorts of things. It's a big thing. I'm not going to comment on whether it's right or wrong. And for those who are feeling upset by that, are scared by that, are feeling any way about that, look it up. Research it. Google it. Everything we're going through today is a lesson in, if something makes me feel strongly, I should double check it's true. So I know more about it, and hopefully I don't feel as scared about it, or I don't feel as upset about it. Hopefully. So what misinformation have you come across? I remember there was early on in March. Yeah, I think in March. There was Oh, are they? Well, aside from the general conditions of a prison. Comment, they're just keeping them in super inhumane conditions. Funny that I was talking with my mom about that a while back. Not about the prisons, but about what's going on with the U.S. immigrant detention centers. Something we don't hear much about. I have not actually done much research into it because I have got a life that distracts me. The 5G tower stuff is something else. But back to my point, earlier last month, there was a McDonald's here in Hamilton that closed because, well, one of its employees had COVID-19. And this was early, so it's like, it was a point where one case was a scary thing. Turns out that person did not have COVID-19. I forget, well, I don't know her name or much about her, but she came in with a note basically saying, like, I'm sick with COVID, and just to get out of work. And that's wrong. They'd, like, just say I'm sick. Just say I have a cold. Just say I don't feel safe working. At the end of the day, I understand there are ramifications of being a part-time employee. You don't have job security. Fair. If you don't want to come into work, don't pretend you have a pandemic virus, because it just causes a hassle. They shut down the store, they cleaned everything, they checked, or everyone else was self-isolating. It was a whole thing over nothing. And that's fake information. That's misinformation from the source. But it's that kind of thing. There were articles all over about it. And it caused issue. So I've rounded up, to start, some examples of both. Yes, they are in fact suing her. There was a lot of money spent trying to sort out that issue. So I've rounded up some real and fake news, all attributed to COVID. And I just want to play a game of what's real. So you guys tell me. I'll start with this one. Which is true? American prisoners are digging mass COVID-19 graves in New York? Or COVID-19 actually came from a laboratory in China near the wet market where the virus supposedly originated? The original belief was, well, the theory was that it was bats at a wet market. Turns out it's a laboratory in China, not too far from there. So I'll give that a second to see any answers roll in. I'm not too sure what my delay is at right now, so it could be a moment. But one of these is in fact true. And don't get me wrong, they're both kind of freaky stories. But which one do you believe is true? So, Kenna, you believe the laboratory article is real? Anyone else? We've caught up, so Bolt report. Okay. So while that feeds in as people are answering that, I'm going to move on to the next one. We'll find out at the end. I promise you, you will find out what is real. Which is true. Penguins are roaming the Chicago Aquarium because of COVID-19. With the caption, with reduced pollution and zoos closed due to COVID-19, penguins are finally returning to their natural role as zookeepers, aquarium lords, subjugators of dolphins, and inevitable overlords of all humanity. Or, as people shelter from COVID-19, dolphins are returning to the canals of Venice. Same with fish. As the water clears up and there's fewer sources of pollution in the water. So which one's real? Again, I promise you one is real and one is not. Are dolphins, ignoring Peter or whatever his name is quote, are dolphins or penguins roaming the Chicago Aquarium, or are dolphins returning to Venice canals? So dolphins in Venice is real. I see an answer. I'll let more feed in. Venice is real. For the record, the various articles and posts that I'm seeing about this, it's dolphins, swans are returning, fish is returning. The idea is there's less pollution, and so they're coming back for the first time in 60 years. So, again, you'll find out the answer in a moment. Our final article, contrast. WWE wrestling has been classified an essential service in Florida, meaning that wrestling can go on despite COVID, or that consuming baking soda with lemon juice does help alleviate symptoms of COVID-19. This is holistic medicine. It's not saying it's a cure, but it helps. To read the caption, recommended it to a friend who has a 19-year-old battling severe fever with COVID. He started taking it yesterday and is already feeling better. So we got Kiara saying it's baking soda, Kenna saying it's baking soda. I'm not sure. I think it's Jordan saying WWE. Let's find out the answers. So, in our first matchup, which was the laboratory near the market in Wuhan or the mass graves in New York, turns out they are, in fact, digging mass graves in New York. Ditzy brought it up that Hart Island is actually a very traditional home in New York to mass graves. It's not just people being thrown in there. It's people who aren't accounted for, who don't have people to take them back and bury them in proper graves. These are people who are unidentified, which means homeless. It means people who maybe found drug addicts, things like that. People who don't have people to take care of them. And these are, well, they're not specifically COVID patients. A lot of them are COVID patients. The penguins are walking around Chicago Aquarium. Not every day. They're taking little walks at night with the zookeepers. They get to meet all the fish. They get to meet the dolphins. There's a wonderful little video of a penguin and a beluga whale meeting each other, and it's very cute. The Venice posts that everyone's been sharing around, and I was originally kind of caught by, turns out that the dolphins are coming to a different city in Italy, not far off from Venice. Venice has cleared up its water a little bit, but that's mostly because boats aren't kicking up the mud. There's no evidence to show that dolphins are there. Yes, swans are returning. That's fine. There are some fish. The water's clearer. But the dolphins, all the photos, all the video are from a different city in Italy. And finally, the WWE has been deemed an essential service. We need wrestling as much as we need grocery stores and hospitals. At least in Florida. Which means that, yes, baking soda and lemon juice may, in fact, be good for you. Holistically, like same as drinking a shot of cider vinegar kind of thing. But ultimately, there's no evidence that it helps with COVID in any way. It will help with a cold, perhaps. It will help immune boosting. But at the end of the day, there has been no definitive holistic treatment for COVID. Way to go, Florida, from Ditzy. Yeah, and that's the thing. I very carefully curated these to show that sometimes the real news is just as crazy as the fake. If you were born in Florida, you're immune to the virus. It's definitely been interesting. There's kind of some shady dealings between the powers that be that deemed it an essential service and Donald Trump, in fact. It's worth looking into. Oh God, Florida Man. Don't get me started about Florida Man. For those who don't know, there's now a link in chat to floridaman.com. But Florida Man is the world's greatest superhero and the world's greatest villain, all wrapped into one. So, that's our news. That's our fake news, respectively. It's definitely bizarre to see a lot of this stuff that's going on. And at the end of the day, on an average day, when things are normal and not a pandemic, it can be just as crazy. Florida Man's a very good example of how crazy news can be, just on an average day. Which means that fake news can be just as rational, if you're not careful about it. So, I threw this back in from our one of our classes a month and change ago. There are 7 different types of misinformation that I taught you guys about. I'm not going through them again here. I gave you a resource on Canvas of just those slides from that old lesson. But I wanted to remind you of these. There's satire and parody. We saw that with the Justin Trudeau ASMR article. There's things like false connection, where a photo doesn't necessarily have the photo on the front of the article. It might not have anything to do with the rest of the article, but that connection causes misinformation. Florida Man ruined my marriage. We have misleading content and false content, imposter content, where parts are true, parts are not. With false content, it's very, very often that it's a misquote, a misattribution, sometimes intentionally so. Imposter content is where we get something that comes from cbc.ca and something that comes from cbc.co.uk. But they're both meant to look like CBC, the Canadian news source. Manipulated content is where we see this all the time with Donald Trump, where we take someone holding up a blank piece of paper or what was an original document and replace it with something completely different. Sometimes for a joke, very often for a joke, but also sometimes to intentionally deceive. And then fabricated content is our fake news. When we say fake news, it is fabricated content, made up from the very start. So, I just wanted to remind you guys of those as we go into some case studies. These are examples I grabbed from that list I asked people on my Facebook page to share. So, in the case of this case study, give me a second, I'm going to take a sip of water. So, for this case study, we're looking at the ever updating list of information. These aren't cases where people are putting out intentionally false bits of information to fool people. It's, if you asked me yesterday what the total cases in Ontario for COVID is versus today, I might not necessarily be accurate with either of those numbers, because things are ever changing. So let's look at the list, right? What's the risk level of COVID-19? How much risk is there with the disease? If you catch it, will you die? How easy is it to catch it? How easy is it to avoid catching it? Ultimately, the risk level constantly changes, especially for the first few months of the pandemic. We went from, if you look at the United States, we went from it'll disappear in April when it gets warm, all the way to the most cases of any country in the world. Even in Canada, we had, I forget her name, our chief health representative. She went through several different stages of increasing the risk of the pandemic, as far as we perceived it. And this isn't fake news. It's not like, oh, well, when it was only in China and a couple thousand cases, it was just as dangerous as the retirement home right next to my house having a bunch of cases. There's a different level of risk there. But the thing is, some people have outdated information. And so that's where we can run into misinformation. Next up, who needs to wear masks? I'd love to see someone in chat tell me exactly what the point of wearing a mask as a average citizen is at this moment. In fact, I'm going to take a moment. Pardon me, I hit my mic. I got excited. If I go out to the grocery store, do I need to wear a mask? What do you guys think? The music dies with that question, so I'm left in silence for a moment. So I'll let you guys catch up for a moment. Do I need to wear a mask if I go out? There we go. We have it right in one. Kiara, a mask only helps prevent me from spreading my own sickness. You should wear them to prevent as much spreading as possible. Absolutely correct. And a homemade one, yeah. A homemade mask or a cheap medical mask, not one of the fitted ones. They're a really good way for if you go into the hospital. Let's not talk about when COVID's going on. When I go into the hospital on an average day, I'll put on a mask if I'm coughing, if I have an illness, because I don't want to spread my mucus and phlegm and all this gross crap to everyone around me. It's when people look at China as an example, people in China all wearing masks, they don't step out the door thinking this mask will keep me safe. There have been many people on record who say this mask will keep others safe if I don't know I'm sick. It prevents me from spreading it. So me going to the store, yes, if I maybe asymptomatic, I don't know I yet have COVID, it's a good call to wear one. The homemade mask is a good call, because again, we're not trying to design the N95 masks that prevent 95% of dropules from breaching the barrier. We're just trying to prevent as much as we can. And if we're not taking away from the hospitals, that's always a good call. So with that, absolutely. There's my cursor. Ultimately, it's still a subject of debate and misinformation. You guys are right. I've done so much reading into this so that I could say this confidently. Different governments, different politicians, different medical experts are saying different things, but ultimately that is the recommendation. Don't spread it by wearing a mask, and ideally wear a homemade mask. But if you're wearing a mask, don't be surprised if you still catch something. You guys, for the record, also have access to these PowerPoints where you can click on these source links and see some sources I gathered for you. This is the key to the fact side of this case study, are the sources I give you. So, does COVID-19 live on surfaces? If I cough onto my desk and I have COVID-19, how long is my desk contaminated? You guys don't need to, you can feel free to answer, but ultimately we aren't sure. There are different rates, there are different numbers, there are different hours. It's constantly changing depending on who you ask. And that's the concern about the ever-updating list, is the information's only as good as it's good. It's like buying a whole bunch of loaves of bread and being surprised that when a week from now, all that bread or information is out of date. So, one good example is they said that COVID-19 could be airborne for up to 7 hours, I believe it was. This was a while ago. When they said this, the test that confirmed that fact put COVID-19 into a atomizer. It's that little thing you buy at Sage in the mall that like creates a little smoke with the essential oils. So that information is absolutely true if you're in that very specific scenario. Same with, well, I have in chat 5 days on metal, something like 6 days on wood, a few hours on plastic. Sorry, up to 3 days on plastic. This is very true. Then there's also studies looking into whether the COVID being there is still viable for you getting sick. It can still be alive and not be viable to, diffuser, there we go, thank you. It can still be alive and not viable to contaminate you. I'm not saying don't be concerned about these things. I'm saying that don't be surprised when someone says to you, oh, well, I heard it was 7 days on metal because my friend Billy got it 7 days after touching a metal crate. Well, maybe he did, but he may have touched something else too, right? It's really hard to prove all this stuff definitively. When will everything open again? We've been given a million different numbers. Various countries have been given a million different numbers. The United States was looking at reopening for Easter for a little bit. At the end of the day, it depends on who you ask, but do not ask Donald Trump. Because he's got it wrong, I think, about 8 or 9 times in a row at this point. And he said definitively, it will be here. Even right now, I mentioned at the very beginning of this that Doug Ford's government pushed back when high schools and elementary schools will reopen. Because things are always changing. Because things are always updating. Because things haven't got to the point where we feel it's safe yet. For myself, my sister is immunocompromised. I won't get into details about her own life, but basically she's more at risk. I know when things reopen, I'm not going out for a while because people will still be getting sick. They're not going to reopen things when no cases exist anymore. They're reopening things when it's safe enough, when the risk is worth it. When there will only be 100 cases which we can take care of in one hospital instead of overrunning hospitals. There's all sorts of different models about this. And so these models change. Finally, when will there be a vaccine? When will we have a definitive cure? Not for a while. Vaccines take a very long time. There's plenty of evidence showing that it'll be at least a year before there's a vaccine. That doesn't mean there won't be a treatment sooner. We have ways to treat people that aren't necessarily cures, right? Are you talking... We have a question. What are your thoughts about the upcoming election with the whole debate on mail-in voting? I assume you're talking about the U.S. election. And I am 100% for mail-in voting. There is no evidence at all showing that there is widespread voter fraud with mail-in voting, which is the concern of the Republicans. And at the end of the day, mail-in voting means that the poor, it means that the disabled, it means that anyone can vote. Which, how do I put it? In the United States, there is in the United States and Canada for that matter, there is a wonderful, terrible phenomenon wherein particularly the right-wing party, but both parties don't necessarily want everyone to vote, depending on who's in power. Because in the United States, for example, if all the poor black people in the United States vote, who wouldn't normally have, suddenly that's a whole lot of votes for the Democrats. In Canada, for example, if rural Alberta or rural Quebec vote, that's a whole bunch of votes for liberal or conservative respective parties. That's why gerrymandering is a big thing as well. They mix everything up. They cut all these lines in voting districts to screw with the voting population. There is also the whole Wisconsin ordeal, which I'm not going to get into at the moment. Instead, unfortunately. Moving on to our next case, our takeaways. The moral of case study number 1, our ever-growing list, is that anyone who has a set-in-stone answer for you is lying. It's not that they believe they're lying to you. It's not that they know it's false. They're not trying to fool you. But anyone who says my answer is set in stone and will never change is being foolish. COVID-19 is a novel virus. That means it's new. It means we don't know everything about it and things are changing. Again, I give you a source, a credible starting point for your own research. I think it's an article from Time magazine. I recommend checking it out. Case study number 2, hydroxychloroquine. Don't ask me how many times I practice saying it. I do have some practice because one person in my house actually takes this medicine for legitimate reasons. The theory is that hydroxychloroquine will cure you of COVID-19 if you are infected. Or that if you're not infected, you haven't caught it yet, hydroxychloroquine will make you immune to COVID-19. Finally, that the testing of this drug is complete and proven, and all that proof corroborates the above points. I will be blunt on this one. Again, being in the same household as someone who takes this medicine, no tests have shown that hydroxychloroquine, also known as Plaquenil, is effective treatment for people infected with COVID-19. Many tests are still ongoing. I have a source for you. Next up, the danger involved with taking the drug dangers involved are minimal or non-existent. Well, we've already tested the drug. It's already on the market, so there's no dangers to people taking it. Right? No. There are indications that this drug in high doses, the doses given to people, or in theory given to people with COVID-19 to cure them, is dangerous for the heart. There was an entire study in Brazil. There's an entire study in Brazil that was canceled because people experienced heart failure because of the drug. For the record, this study was the one that Donald Trump attributed this drug being a miracle drug to. I recommend looking at the source. Finally, again, from my own perspective, yes, there are people mixing up there are people mixing up this drug with a very similar sounding drug or very similar composition of drug that's used for fish tanks. Ultimately because it just kills them. They took it wrong. And some of these people are fools and are hoarding all of this. Some of these people are misinformed and die. I don't necessarily blame them for taking something because they're scared. I do blame the people for telling them that the drug will cure them. There are a lot of shortages of the actual human drug for people who take it for legitimate illnesses. You have to keep in mind this drug is an anti-malarial. It's a cure for people who have malaria all over the world. It's also used for illnesses such as, there's a few autoimmune, lupus. Lupus is a big one. People with lupus take this drug legitimately. And there are concerns for them that they won't have access to this drug that they need to take every day to live. Takeaways. Because of this misinformation, many doctors and patients have hoarded the drug. There are doctors who I give a prescription to my mom, a prescription to my dad, a prescription to all my siblings, and one for myself. That way our family has like 700 tablets. And that's wrong. Same with patients. Patients do it too. Many look to this drug as a solution and lose a sense of greater perspective of the issue. Not just of the drug and the people who take it, but of COVID. Imagine walking around having taken one pill and thinking, I am invincible. I can cough in anyone's face and they won't get sick because I'm immune to the disease. There's an issue there. Ideally, well, ultimately those people are jerks too, but the people who tell them this information are just as equally at fault. The touting of this drug as a cure has concerned many who take it for legitimate reasons. Again, people in my household included. Case study 3. 5G. Some of you are familiar with this concept. Ultimately, I'll give you the quick run through. In a nutshell, there are some people who believe that 5G wireless signals are killing people. There is no evidence that 5G signals cause acute health risks. Keep in mind that 5G, for those who aren't aware of what this means, 5G is a 5th generation of wireless signal. It is a type of radio signal used for Wi-Fi and for data. It runs on the same frequency or a similar frequency to radio waves and television frequencies and cell phone frequencies. Nothing crazy. They're not pumping out X-rays into the air. There is no proof that any of that causes any immediate health concerns. Technically, if you took apart one of the antennas and I think stuck your head inside of it, you might experience a few symptoms. That's about it. These people who believe these things often claim that the symptoms of radiation sickness from 5G are being disguised as a new virus called COVID-19. So it's not that people have COVID, it's that 5G is killing people and the government, the people in power, the people who control the 5G are pretending it's an illness. Ignoring the whole secret government controlling everything. The symptoms of radiation poisoning and COVID-19 are not the same. The people dying of COVID-19 from pneumonia are not coughing up blood. Their skin is not... If you want to see a good idea of what radiation poisoning looks like, watch the mini-series. What's it called? Watch the mini-series Chernobyl. That's a good example of what people dying of radiation looks like, as much as TV can do. COVID-19 is not the same thing. Finally, many have taken to the internet to spread this theory, and some have actually attacked cell towers as a result. COVID-19 is indeed its own lethal virus. It caused a pandemic this year. I don't need a source for that one. I think we all can see that this is a real thing. Takeaways. I'm surprised I've not had anyone shout out in chat about how crazy this crap is. The 5G theory is completely false. It is fake news. It is a conspiracy theory. This source I give you here is a really in-depth analysis of this theory from Forbes, and it's really worth reading. This conspiracy theory is not based on any actual facts of any sort. More important than it being false, the theory is dangerous. People who believe this don't take actual precautions against actual dangers like COVID-19. Never mind attacking cell towers and spreading misinformation. Like, it's all garbage. So I have a little experiment. I know how this experiment goes because I already did it yesterday. Trying to do some research here. So what we're going to do There we go. And that one. Bear with me for a moment. What we're going to do is we're going to go onto Facebook. We're going to search the phrase coronavirus bloody vomit. I know, it's a phrase, right? It's not that bad. Set the search to public and look at the hundreds of accounts who indulge in this 5G garbage. So I'm going to drag my Facebook over from my other window. There we go. So I search coronavirus bloody vomit. Then I go up to where the posts are from. Anyone, myself, my friends. I'm going to set it to public. Let's look at Emily LeClaire. Oh, this is actually a good one. Here we go. Here's one of the ones I saw yesterday. 5G. Children had to be put out of schools for covert installation. 5G is 10,000 times the strength of 4G. Symptoms of 5G radiation sickness include shortness of breath, cold and flu, passing out, fever, increased cancer risk, foggy thinking, nightmares, headache, dizziness, disorientation. Literally every symptom you can name. Here's why we have a fake pandemic, COVID-19. Not going to keep that up any longer. Another 5G post. Another 5G post. Something tells me that this ends with a 5G post. Either way, it's all over. This is an example of what fake news looks like. Because it's not just one person saying it. It's hundreds. And each of those hundreds has shares, has comments, has views. We don't necessarily track how many people have watched this on Facebook alone. Never mind Reddit. Never mind Twitter. Yeah, if you want to see fake news in action, Facebook's a really good example of doing that. So, what do? We double check our info. We don't just hit the share button, whether it's good or bad news. I hit the share button on the Dolphins in Venice. I'm not going to lie. And then found out not too long after that I was just wrong. Think about those fake news articles or the real versus fake that I showed you at the beginning of this. These things are real hard to spot sometimes. Especially in times like this where anything could be true. We could have prisoners digging mass graves. We could have the WWE deemed an essential service. Hopefully not here, but either way. It's crazy. So, every time you share without verification, you add noise to the conversation. You become one of those many different posts we were just looking at. Because I can guarantee some of those people saw it and hit share, and that was it. They didn't think, it's 5G's the culprit, I'm a whack job conspiracy theorist. No, they were some old dude sitting in his house with nothing better to do because he's in social isolation, annoyed that everything is going on, entertaining an idea and hitting the share button. Take responsibility for independently vetting content that you see online. Research. I spent all of yesterday researching fake news and it was tiring. I'm not going to lie. You don't have to spend all day. Most of these things you can just plug into Google, click the news tab and see what sources there are. If you see something like CBC, BBC, CNN, never mind all sorts of other legitimate news websites sharing it, then yeah, probably true. If you're only seeing Breitbart or Bolt News, I really popped into the mic, Bolt News, then there's a good chance it's fake. I mentioned this in our older class. You know when you're supposed to wait after eating before you get in the water to swim? Same idea with sharing stuff. I'll message myself stuff I want to share later just because I want to double check that it's true. And this isn't something that's easy to make a habit of, but once you do, it's kind of a hard habit to break, is doing research and thinking critically. Yeah. So, I'm going to talk about journalism ethics. I'm going to go through this one real quick. I recommend reading through this. This is a very dry bit of content, so I don't want to bore you too much. Before I get to that, how's everyone doing? Do we have any questions? Do we want to take a quick 5-minute break to go use the washroom and get some stuff? I've got a break screen if need be. You shut your mouth about InfoWars. Like, they were right about turning the frogs gay, but that's it. Switch to here for now. Good to know I still have someone in chat at least. I assume that's a yes please to a break. So I'm going to just chill on the cam screen for 5 or so minutes. 5, maybe 10. We'll see. So if you need to go use the washroom, you need to go do something, go do it. My intermission screen is not exciting. None of my graphics are exciting. Here, I'll pop it up for a second. Yeah, look at that. Those graphics, that blue. The blue on blue and that font. Yeah, no, I'm still working on the graphics. I've been a tad busy trying to wrangle 3 classes and stream them all. But graphics will get updated soon enough. So yeah, if anyone needs to take a break, take a break. I'm just chilling here for now. Here's a bit of news. Not good news, unfortunately. According to CTV News, Toronto, Ontario COVID-19 deaths soar to a single-day record as province confirms 494 new cases. From Sean Davidson. Yeah, it's 51 people have died today. How are y'all feeling about all this? Like, ready to get back to school, all well and good. Like, it's, from my perspective, not an easy time emotionally. I'm curious how you all are holding up. Feel free to answer. Feel free to not. Like, I will admit I'm, again, one of the lucky ones because I have work. I have something to... Sorry, I keep touching my face, which is a no-no. I do have sanitizer somewhere around my desk. I have work to keep me busy. Like, when you're spending half your week doing something actively, it's easy to just tune out everything else, you know? And even when I'm not, like, my sister, her boyfriend, we just finished putting together a 9,000 piece puzzle, which is bigger than any table in my house. And I've been rocking Animal Crossing for the last few weeks, which is just nostalgia like crazy. What about yourselves? What are you doing to keep keep busy. For those who didn't run to take a quick break. What's the puzzle of? It's no, I got a moment. Let's see if I can't find it. There we go. No, I didn't want to open the link. Open image. It's not the best resolution, but Streamlabs. That's the puzzle we put together. Again, not a great resolution, but it took a while. We've been doing it for close to a month. We did it in 4 quarters because, again, our table wasn't big enough, so now we just have to put it all together. I will also tell you that putting together a very high-resolution puzzle of dolphins. Dolphins are the worst animal for this puzzle. And the stingray. It's all gray. So I'm going to close that down for a moment. That's awesome. Good to hear, Kenna. Yeah, my mom was looking into making masks, but she's not much of a... She doesn't so much sew as she's a knitter. So right now she's figuring out how she can help out. Art's definitely a good call. I wanted to do painting, but when I paint, I like to paint in the backyard, and it's not being quite warm enough yet. If it's too cold, my acrylics all dry up. And hikes are also a good call. I went on admittedly, the hike was a tad too long, but I went on a hike. I walked from, those who know the area, I walked from Felkers Falls to Battlefield Park and then to Devil's Punch Bowl and back. I think it was like a 16-kilometer hike. Normally I just go for like a half-hour walk, but that day I felt like going crazy with it. But hikes are a good call. Just getting outside, even if you're just walking around your neighborhood for 5 minutes, really, I find helps me clear my head. If I have a problem I'm thinking about with work, I tend to think about that. But when I'm just frustrated and feeling cabin fever, I like to step outside. We've also been playing catch out front because we're right on a park. So we'll play catch or hit the ball around a little bit. We were doing badminton, but the kit we have is super low quality, so the birdies just catch the wind and go, which is frustrating. How about anyone else? Heard a little bit about what's going on. Anyone else? How are you dealing with COVID? How are you dealing with being stuck at home right now? How are the rest of your classes going? I'm very curious how other teachers are doing this kind of stuff. I'm going to give us, I think, a couple more minutes, and then we'll get to the second half of class, which shouldn't take too long. Hopefully it doesn't take too long, because I still have to finish prepping for my next class at 5. Which reminds me, if you're curious about audio-video editing, feel free to tune back in at 5 p.m. because I'm going to be teaching some of my AV students. Let's give it one more minute. Yeah, I can imagine there's a lot of work to catch up on. I've tried my best with all 3 of my classes to not like to actually subtract assignments. I've been trying to take 4 assignments and condense it into 2. That way, albeit the value is more, but it's easier to other teachers, Mohawk, Peralta, are texting for support. Everything can be very confusing on the hub. That's I think a lot of people, like, one thing to keep in mind, and I say this as a fairly new teacher, is that a lot of teachers are just as confused with what's the stuff that's going on as you guys are. And like, our job is to figure it out and get it sorted so we can help, like, educate you. That's our jobs. But it can definitely be confusing on their end too, which only furthers the confusion on your end. That's my goal, is to make this class as simple as possible, as easy as possible. That's why, when it boils down to it, this class is pretty much just assignments and a live stream. Everything else is just other ways for you to get the same information. For those who aren't aware, I will be posting a recording of this class tomorrow, most likely, on YouTube and on Canvas and on this Twitch channel, so you guys can watch back if you missed anything, or anyone who didn't tune in can tune in and catch what we went over. Again, anything to just get you guys the same information in a different way, and work with you. So if there is anything I can do better on my end, feel free to mention it in chat toward the end of class. Feel free to email me. Anything to make it easier for you guys, whether it's assignments, whether it's classes. Feeding off of that, let's just quick bang out this last bit of class. Here we go. So we're looking at journalism ethics. And the big question is, what are ethics? For anyone who's taken a philosophy class, you'll be hopefully familiar with the term. Ethics are the study of what's right and wrong. Some study it from a mathematical perspective, some study it from a philosophical perspective, some use religion to determine their ethics. I'm not going to judge where your ethics come from. In journalism, we use our own journalistic ethics to create rules for how we conduct our business, for how we deal with day-to-day scenarios. Think of these rules like the Hippocratic Oath that doctors have to take. They have to take an oath not to do harm that's unjust. We take an official oath to follow these rules. In a sense. Ultimately, there are no definitive rules. There's no definitive oath for journalists. Different things make up different people's ethics. Different publications, different news organizations have different codes of ethics. So different codes, although they are different, tend to have certain similarities. At the end of the day, most journalistic codes include truthfulness, accuracy, objectivity, being impartial, being fair, being accountable to the public for whatever we do. There's all sorts of things that kind of run across all these different codes. The following slides, which I'm going to kind of just skim through real quick, are my own personal code of ethics with journalism. Or most of it. I think I left out a couple points. It's a good practice to have one of your own. It's a good practice to have your own ethics in general, what you feel is right and wrong. But if you're going to be working and telling people that everything I'm telling you is the truth, everything I'm telling you is news, you want to make sure that you have a code to be bound to. It helps you make tough calls. It allows... It allows you to come across a difficult scenario and not be worried that, well, I don't know how to deal with this. I've never dealt with it before. You at least have something to stand on. It's also good to update your code. As you grow professionally, things change, and that's fine. So here's my code. I'm not going to read through all of these verbatim because it's fairly long-winded. There we go. Transparency basically means that no matter who is looking in on my work, they can see exactly what I'm doing. They can see my intentions, and that the public should be able to find all of my work, past, present, and anything that comes out in the future needs to be accessible. This helps people trust that what I put out is what I put out, and what I put out is truth. If I'm not willing to put my information out there because someone will misinterpret it, I should probably do better at making it clearer. After that, engagement. These are in no particular order, by the way. Engagement, it's one thing to report the news, but we also have to keep our audience interested. I'm going to fix my webcam a little bit. There we go. We have to promote engagement, but we also have to be reasonable about it. Sensationalism is not a legitimate option. But I feel it important to make sure that people see what we put out, to engage with what we put out. We also have to be able to communicate with people in order to engage. Inclusivity and equity. This is one of my most important personal ethics, is that I can't just report for every white guy. I have to include everyone else who makes up our society, who makes up a part of who we are. Whether that's an LGBT concern, whether that's a ethnicity concern, whether even a religious concern. My job isn't to judge. My job is to represent. Sometimes I do that better than others, and when I can't do that to the best of my ability, if I'm trying to report, let's say on a feminist issue or a women's issue, if I can't do that properly, I pass that on to someone who can. For example, my wanting to cover Take Back the Night could be an issue because it's a women's only event. And that's fine. And I accept that I can't fill that demographic, and so I pass stories like that on to some of my coworkers. Media literacy. When I say this, I mean being able to spot fake news, being able to call out fake news, being able to navigate, I have it here, be able to navigate the mass confusion that is the internet, advocate for accurate news reporting, and fight against fake news. It's super important. That's a good value to have just in your daily life. Accuracy. Our articles need to be accurate. Fairness. Our articles need to show all the sides, within reason. We take as many perspectives as possible. Some perspectives don't deserve to be represented. Take an article about black civil rights. I don't necessarily need to get the KKK involved. They have a perspective, I don't want to hear it. Right to privacy. Some people, there is a point at which people live their private lives. I don't belong in that private life. Sometimes we have to walk this line carefully because the things we need to cover and need to inform people of would be private matters, but they affect a bigger audience than that. This is a hard one to walk at times. Independence. I refuse to find myself in someone's pocket. I refuse to write an article about the mayor of Toronto if the mayor of Toronto just bought a house for me. Pretty obvious, right? We just, simply put, don't let anyone buy us. Conflict of interest. If I have a conflict of interest in a story of mine, I either make it clear, or if it's too big, I pass on the story to someone else. Accountability. If I got something wrong, I make sure to clearly say I got it wrong. If I do something wrong, I take accountability for that. That's it. That, in a nutshell, is my code of ethics as a journalist. I recommend reading through the specific points, because at the end of the day, that's kind of what's going to feed into your own codes of ethics. I've also provided you a whole list of other codes of ethics from specific news organizations. We don't necessarily need to read through all of these. They're all fairly similar. They all differ in some regards. Having a code of ethics guides us when we need to make tough calls. There's all sorts of different parts that go into our ethics, whether in daily life or as a journalist. Either way, we need to be aware of these and be able to identify them. Misinformation is dangerous, referring back to the first half of class. Misinformation can do harm. And finally, spotting fake news is simply put, a matter of applying a couple of techniques. Mostly being thinking critically and doing some research. All we really need to do to spot fake news. So, let's quick talk about the Code of Ethics assignment. For those who have stuck through, we still got a good list going. I have a full assignment outline on Canvas, but I wrote up the basics on here. This assignment is 3 questions. The first is, what are some ways we can detect bias in online content? The second, what steps could you take to confirm potentially inaccurate online news? So basically, how do we detect if someone's biased? How do we spot fake news? And then I want you to give me 5 possible clauses for your own online code of ethics. This does not have to be your code of ethics as a journalist. If your brand online is as a social activist, let that be your code of ethics. But clearly it's your online code of ethics. And I don't just want you to put accuracy, transparency, media literacy. That's not good enough. I do want a description. Nothing crazy, just quick. What is it? What does it mean? And like a little bit of why is it important, if you got the room. Ultimately, this assignment's out of 10 marks. I think it's 2 for the first question, 3 for the second, and then 5 for the last one. Again, the outline is on Canvas. That's also where you'll be submitting. And the assignment is due on April 29th at 11:59. So the end of the day. Beyond that, you're submitting as a Word document. It's nothing crazy. It's worth 20% of your mark, just because we only have a couple of assignments. Yeah, I don't believe this is anything that you guys can handle from what I've seen you submit to me. And again, it's a good thing to reflect. We have all this time to ourselves. Let's reflect on who we are and how we operate, how we work. So with that, next class we're talking about how to market yourself with social media. How to market yourself with social media, sharing your brand, and improving your brand online. I don't know why I use this photo. So ultimately, that class will be sort of our start into our LinkedIn assignment, and will actually feed into our next program that I'm teaching you guys, which is when I start to teach you guys advanced social journalism. We start blogging, which I'm hoping will be interesting. If you have questions, you know my email. That said, you can also, I think, direct message me on Canvas as well. So getting back to it, I'm going to go back to Cam. any questions about any of that. We're wrapping things up at this point. I always put a break in, like literally 20 minutes before we wrap everything up. Either way, how do we feel about this? Are we good for the assignment? Do you have any questions about it? Now's your time to ask. And I've mentioned somewhere out there, remember that if you have a question, there's a good chance someone has the same question. Can the account you... It would mean that I have to add you, but aside from that, it'd be fine. Like, assuming I try to add your account and you say yes, then there's no issue with it being private, as long as I can see it. That said, keep in mind that if you're actually doing this sort of thing, you would want to be doing it from a public account. But I can't force you to make a public account. Well, I could, but it'd be mean. So that's the Instagram. Oh, that's the other thing. Instagram assignment is due today, I believe. It's very hard to keep track of it all. Any other questions? Any questions about this code of ethics? Oh, a moth down here. Weird. Beyond that, any other questions generally? And if not, if I don't get anything in the next couple of minutes, I'll consider this first class a relative success. Also going to change my music. Man, this playlist got real dull. I'll do... Where's that glacier song? That works. Okay, here we go. Got some questions. I'm having issues using Canvas, accessing things you're posting. Noted. Okay, I'm assuming y'all are correct on the Instagram assignment. Let me double check. Either way, the deadline on Canvas is the deadline on Canvas, but yep, that checks out. 17th. Okay, so first of all, as far as using Canvas, do me a favor and email me about that. We'll see about sorting all that out. The only classes you guys have are Wednesdays at 1 p.m. If you can't make that time for some reason, things will be on the YouTube account the next day. Yes, also for 1 p.m. Also, beauty. Good. But yeah, so I will make sure to have everything uploaded within 24 hours of the stream. Yeah, just so that it's all up there for anyone who couldn't tune in, right? But yeah, Canvas, no problem there. We'll make sure to get you online as soon as possible. But yes, to confirm, Instagram assignment due on the 17th. But with that, I'm going to give it one more minute. With that, I'm going to say thank you all for tuning in and engaging with class. It's always better when people are chatting. And I hope that you gain something today. Definitely an important topic right now is misinformation with everything going on. But I'll I'm going to leave this running for one more minute. But, yeah. I'm going to call class a success, and I'll say I will see you next week at 1 p.m. on Wednesday. And again, if you're interested in audio video for any reason, feel free to tune in again. Literally later today at 5, I'm teaching some audio video editing techniques to some of my college students. If you're interested. If not, see you next week. Thanks for watching.